Greetings! If you have been following my channel at all for the last month or so, you will have seen that I uploaded a series of shorts to give little blurbs to go with each one of my rules. There are 51 of them. But wait, if the last one was Rule 50, how's there 51? Because the first one is Rule 0. And I always tell my students, Rule 0 is so important it comes before Rule number 1. Which, for the record, Rule 0 is if it's not yours, don't touch it. And I would be willing to bet that I probably used that one rule more than anything else in my classroom, hands down. So I wanted to provide a little context for the series of rule videos, and I am working on launching this in a longer format. So rather than it just being the collection of individual rule videos, 51 of them, then there would be a format where it could be all together. There was an introduction video that I made that was the first video in the series. There was a short in and of itself, but I don't think that I fully encapsulated where the rule thing came from and how I actually use it. So, first off, I had a lot of people say, oh, that's a lot of rules. That was one of the first comments I got when I started posting them. Yes and no. The thing that teachers like to talk about and administrators like to promote and teacher prep programs like to say, oh, you should have no more than 3 rules. Well, okay, that's great. That's also kind of a lie. 3 rules isn't enough to functionally describe the procedures that you have to have in place to have a successful, well-managed classroom. You can have 3 overarching themes that act as like the big rules themselves, but 3 rules is not it in anyone's classroom. I don't think I've ever been in someone's classroom where they truly had 3 rules, and that was that. It's more like, work hard, be kind, be ready, that sort of stuff. Okay, great. So what about when I need to use the bathroom? How do I do that? Well, that's a procedure more than a rule. Okay. Are there rules about when I can or can't go to the bathroom? Do I need to raise my hand? Do I need to make sure that I've taken care of it on my own? So on and so forth. There's lots of little specific situations that require extra care and extra thought from the teacher to make sure that students are set up to be successful. Now, what I wanted to use as my guideline for these rules started out as Gibbs rules from NCIS. If you've ever watched NCIS, you'll know that Gibbs has a set of rules that he lives his life by. And in one of the episodes, he even says, oh yeah, a bunch of rules. There's about 50 of them. But his rules are rules for life. It's situations that he gets into and needs some sort of guidance or provides that guidance for others. And that's kind of how he lives his life, both personally and professionally. I remember watching that and thinking that was kind of a powerful idea. You've got these set of rules that you have written down and you can follow that. There's your code. The other thing that I found inspiration from is Ron Clark's Essential 55. When I was first starting as a teacher, that was required reading in my school. I think I probably have 2 or 3 copies of that book now that have been handed to me over the years, either by administrators or other teachers, where like we're doing book study, that sort of thing. Here, read these. This is good stuff. One of the things in Ron Clark's Essential 55 is he talks about the need for explicit structure, explicitly stated guidelines and routines, and that students thrive on structure and routine and knowing what to do in any given situation they might find themselves in the classroom. Then the other piece of that is the rules are both important and rigid and serious, as well as lighthearted and fun. I forget what the number is, but one of his rules is no Doritos. You're not allowed to have Doritos in class. And if you have Doritos, he would destroy the Dorito bag in the most ridiculous, over-the-top, crazy fashion as possible, to the point where students would bring in Doritos just so he could find them and blow up the whole bag of Doritos. I don't know that I've ever gone quite that far. But as you look at my system of rules, or my set of rules, you should notice that some of them are serious, some of them are not. And that's a good thing, because in addition to providing routine and structure and a semblance of order, it's also about building relationships. That's the number one thing about being a teacher. Teachers who are successful may not be the best pedagogues. They may not have the most immaculate Pinterest-worthy classrooms. They may not have the most well thought out, laid out, logical, coherent lesson plans. But their students will go to battle for them. The best teachers are the ones that have the best relationships, even if it doesn't look like what the traditional relationship should look like on paper. You have students who are diehard fans of teachers who are very stern. You have students who are diehard fans of teachers who are very relaxed and lax with certain things. But those relationships are crucial. And when I was creating my list of rules, those relationships were at the forefront of my mind with many of the rules that I created. I want students to know what to do. I also want students to know that it's okay, we have some fun. There's a time for fun, there's a time for work. But the fun should be part of the work, and that should be a regular part of what we do. And that's why it's in the rules. I mean, Rule 23, never mess with a music teacher's coffee. That exists partly because kids want to tease you about, oh, I'm going to take your coffee, I'm going to steal your coffee. No, you're not. No, you're not. Rule 29, Mr. Earley wins. That one, I get more rolled eyes and groans and arguments and that silly stuff when we go over the rules at the beginning of the year for that more than anything else. Rule 29, why does Mr. Earley win? Well, my name's on the door. It's my classroom. Also, I made the rules. Mr. Earley wins. So on and so forth. So, as a teacher, my goal is relationships, structure, order, routine, predictability, fun, enjoyment, all of those things. And I would love to think that my set of rules encapsulates that, in my own particular way. Hopefully that comes across in this series of videos. If it doesn't, they're always a work in progress. And as far as the video thing, most of them were shot in one take while I was either at school or in my studio. And don't think too hard about them. It'll be okay. So hopefully you enjoy these, and hopefully you get something out of them. I've been using the rules for quite a while now, and we'll continue to use them for the foreseeable future.
Rule 0. Rule 0 is so important it comes before rule number 1. Rule 0 says if it's not yours, don't touch it.
Whoa, no touchy. No touchy. No touch.
Kids always think they're clever. Well, the floor's not mine and I can touch that. Right, and you know exactly what I mean. If you have permission to use something, use it. If you don't have permission, leave it alone. If it's someone else's instrument, don't touch it. If it's my instrument, definitely don't touch it. If you have permission to do something, by all means, use it appropriately. But if it's not yours, don't touch it. Rule 1. Always come prepared. Rule 1 also comes with a sub-rule. Rule 1A says always bring your own music. Come prepared. Have your instrument on the days we have rehearsal. Bring your music, your book, any materials that you need to be successful in class. Bring your own music even if you're sharing a music stand with a partner, so that if you need to make notes in the music or circle things to practice later, you have your copy to do that on, and you'll carry those notes with you. Rule 1, always come prepared. Rule number 2, accept responsibility. Sometimes we do stuff we shouldn't do, and we know it. Take ownership of it. Take responsibility for doing better and learning. Or take responsibility for learning the things that you need to learn. Take responsibility for your own growth as an individual, as a musician, and just in general. Always take responsibility. Rule 3. Your instrument, your responsibility. I cannot tell you the number of times I've had children tell me, I don't have my instrument because my mom forgot to, My dad didn't. And I always ask, is it your instrument or is it your dad's instrument? It's your instrument. It's your responsibility. You need to be responsible for it, so you need to make sure that you have what you're supposed to have. You need to make sure that you've taken care of whatever needs to be taken care of. Say your valves need oiling. Get it done. Say your keys are having some kind of alignment issue. Get it looked into, whether that's bringing it to me or somebody else. More importantly, carry your own instrument. Don't try and pawn it off on somebody else. Rule 4. You're not prepared if you don't have a pencil. Rule 4A. Pencils are for writing and erasing only. Now there's a catch to that. So musicians should always have a pencil at rehearsal. You can always make notes to yourself. You can circle things that you need to work on. You can add directions that the conductor talks about, that sort of thing. Sometimes you play a piece of music where they have you tap your music stand with a pencil or something like that. So in that case, use the pencil how you need to. But in general, I don't want to see pencils being used as weapons or as batons or some kind of toy. So rule 4, you're not prepared if you don't have a pencil. 4A, pencils are for writing and erasing only. Parentheses, unless the music says otherwise. Rule 5, you don't waste good. This one a lot of people struggle with. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's what you have to do. However, if you show aptitude for something and it's something you enjoy, lean into it. Don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about if it's cool or if it is silly or whatever. If you're good at something, take it as far as you can. Have fun with it. Use it to make a more fulfilling life. Just don't waste it. Don't be good at something, take it for granted, not utilize it, and miss out on opportunities. Rule 5, you don't waste good. Rule 6, the instrument doesn't practice itself. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Later on, I'm going to get into a bit about the rule of 10,000 hours and reaching mastery level and what that takes. But the instrument doesn't practice itself. Too many students seem to leave instruments in the case all the time and then act surprised when they don't know what to do. I've had students that it's taken months and months of school before they can comfortably assemble their instrument on their own. The instrument doesn't practice itself. You have to put in the time. You have to put in the effort. Rule 7. If it sounds bad, it needs more work. A lot of people get stuck at, it sounds bad, and give up. Don't give up. Keep working at it. If it sounds bad, it needs more work. And if you've worked at it and it sounds less bad, awesome. That's improvement. That's our goal. Our goal is always to make this time better than last time. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't need to be perfect. As long as you're moving forward, you're making progress. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Don't let good be the enemy of okay, so on and so forth. If it sounds bad, it needs more work. Give it the work it needs. Rule 8. Practice is good. Polished is better. I'm sure everybody's heard the saying, practice makes perfect. It's wrong. Practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. Our goal is to give the best performance possible, but if you practice in a ton of mistakes and practice in a bunch of extra garbage that doesn't belong, it's not going to be perfect. And it's going to take a lot more work to make it perfect or to get it closer to perfection. A polished performance is better than one that has had a lot of practice in the wrong way. We don't want perfection necessarily, but we do want to show that our hard work has been worth something, that our hard work has gotten us closer to our goal as musicians. So practiced is good, polished is better. Rule 9. Consistency is key. As a teacher, one of the things that I love the most is when a student figures something out and gets it right for the first time. The only thing that I think is really better than that is when a student realizes that they have reached the point where they get it right every time, especially if it's something that was a challenge to them that they struggled with before. Consistency is all about being able to not only do it right, but to do it right every time, to do it the same way every time. You know exactly what's going to happen because you've been there before. In that same vein, I always tell students, don't act like you've never been on stage before. We've been here before. This is great. Have a good time with it. Consistency is key. Rule 10. Never take anything for granted. This is one of those rules for music, rules for life, rules for everything. Don't take things for granted. Don't just assume that because things are the way they are, that they're supposed to be like that, or you're entitled to it, or you're somehow supposed to have, deserve to have, whatever. Don't take it for granted. Be appreciative of what you have. Be appreciative of your opportunities, the things that you can do, the things that you want to do, that you can try. Just be appreciative. Never take anything for granted. Rule 11. There are no shortcuts in music. I always hear talk about, kids these days don't understand hard work. Well, no, it's not that. But when you're raised on video games that are designed to get you from no skill to all of the skill that you need by walking you through a spoon-fed tutorial, step by step by baby step, and have fun along the way and inflate your sense of self-worth, this is what happens. You look for shortcuts. You look to game the system. In music, you have to put in the time. There are certain things that you can do faster. There are more efficient ways to get there, but there's not actual shortcuts. You have to put in the work, and that's what it takes. There are no shortcuts in music. Rule 12. Respect the groove.
Ow! You threw off my groove.
I can't tell you how hard it is sometimes to get students to play to a steady beat, let alone to feel the pocket or where the groove is supposed to be. Once you establish the groove, you can find the pocket, stay there, live there. The better your groove, the better musician you can show that you are. More importantly, the Emperor's New Groove. Don't throw off the groove. Beware the groove. Rule 13. Don't argue with feedback. When someone's trying to give you feedback, whether it's a colleague, a mentor, peers, parents, friends, neighbors, children, don't argue with feedback. Even if you don't agree with it, sometimes the best thing you can do is take the feedback, accept it for what it is, and move on. If it's worthwhile, incorporate it into what you do. Don't make excuses for feedback. Oh, well, Johnny was tired. He'd been playing for a really long time. That's why his hand position was on the wrong part of the slide brace. Oh, little Sally was not feeling well, so she wasn't listening because she was distracted by... Things happen. We understand things happen. Don't argue with feedback. Take it for what it is, incorporate it if it helps, and move on. Rule 14. Acceptable bribes are coffee, bacon, and cookies. I once had a student bring me as a Christmas present a plate of perfectly cooked bacon. It was delicious, it was amazing, and my favorite part was that she essentially just sprang that on her mom. Hey, we need to take some bacon to school. And her mom willingly cooked a plate of bacon, not knowing that it was me until after she was done cooking it, and the kid then needed a plate and some paper towels to cover it to bring it to school. Coffee should be dark roast, extra caffeine if possible. Bacon should be thick sliced, hickory smoked, and cookies should be oatmeal raisin. I'll take no argument on that.
Rule 15. Always work as a team. Whether your team is a duet, a trio, a quartet, quintet, full ensemble, doesn't matter. Always work as a team. We make our best music when we're working together, so don't lose sight of what you can do with the help of others, with the hard work and diligence of others, and let their cooperation, their collaboration be your guide on your musical journey, and let your hard work and collaboration with others help them on theirs as well. Rule 16. Always double check. Just because you made a snap judgment that you think is right doesn't mean there isn't room for error, whether that is your interpretation of music your own opinion about your playing, someone else's playing, chances are a second look is a good idea. Now, that doesn't mean second guess yourself, but you do want to make sure that you're giving everything its fair shake and not just jumping to conclusions. Always double check. Rule 17. Clean up your own mess. 17A. Sometimes you have to clean up someone else's mess. Just get it done. I cannot tell you the number of times in a music classroom, even in an individual private lesson, something has happened. There's something out of place that needs to be taken care of, whether it's a full-on mess or just that someone put their case in the wrong spot or dropped some music or a folder or a pencil or a box of pencils. I don't really care so much that the person who made the mess is the one who cleaned it up, as long as everyone understands that messes are a problem and they should be taken care of. The bigger point there is, if you see something that needs doing and needs taking care of, just take care of it. Clean up your own mess, sometimes even when it's someone else's. Rule 18. Classwork doesn't stop for rehearsal. I teach in an elementary school setting. We do band in 4th and 5th grade, and almost all of those are pull-out lessons. I say almost because my school does it differently than everybody else. That's a story for another time. The important thing is, when you're in rehearsal, chances are there might be something that you have to make up for classwork, for homework, whatever. But the important thing is that you stay on top of stuff and don't use band or some sort of musical rehearsal as an excuse why you're slacking off and not taking care of your own responsibilities. Classwork doesn't stop for rehearsal. Rule 19. Music's hard. If you want easy, play Frisbee. One of the most difficult things for students to understand is that there's not an easy level tutorial to learn to do a lot of things in music. It's not a video game where you have a walkthrough that takes you step by step and spoon feeds you bit by bit. Sometimes you have to learn how to do a whole bunch of things at once. And for wind players in particular, you're having to teach your face how to do something it was never intended to do. Music is hard. Sometimes that means that you're going to have to work harder than you ever expected to. But the payoff is there. The payoff is great, and you should go for it. Music's hard. If you want easy, play Frisbee. Rule 20. If you're convinced that you are right and the entire ensemble's wrong, double check. When you have a group of 30 people, and 29 of them see something in a particular way, or are interpreting something in a particular way, and you think that it's different, it is entirely possible that the other 29 people are wrong. However, before you start going on about how you're right and everybody else is wrong and you're the only one that knows to blah, 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 double check. Make sure you're right first. Otherwise, you're being an insufferable brat, and we don't want that. Nobody likes the insufferable brat in rehearsal, especially when you waste everyone's time because it turns out that you were wrong and everyone else was correct. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it happens. Double check. Rule 21. Instruments can usually be repaired, but they'll never be the same. Instrument cases are designed to keep things organized, make it easy to transport, protect against scratches. They are not designed to be run over, dropped, thrown, mistreated, banged against things, so on and so forth. I cannot tell you the number of times I've had students say, "But it was in the case." Doesn't matter. The case isn't there to protect against your negligence. It's there to make things convenient. If you drop a glass of water, the water hits the floor, the glass shatters. If you tell the glass it was an accident, does it magically get repaired? Rule 22. Dress like you're paid big bucks to perform. Notice that does not say that you have to wear formal attire. It does not say that you have to wear anything specific. Dress like you're paid big bucks to perform really just means take care of your appearance when it's time to perform. Make sure that you're ready. Make sure that you look like you're ready. The audience is going to form an opinion of you from the moment they see you, accurate or not, based entirely on how you look. Make sure that you're not setting yourself up to have to win their trust, win their understanding, because you look like you just rolled out of bed. Rule 23. Never mess with a music teacher's coffee. Rule 24. Check your calendar. Commitments are sacred. As a musician, one of the most awful feelings is realizing that you are either double booked or you have forgotten about some kind of commitment that you've made. And as a musician, that means that you have either let down maybe a paying client, maybe friends, maybe some sort of gig or opportunity that you're lucky to have, maybe the other musicians that you're supposed to play with. You need to make sure that you have a solid calendar and a solid understanding of how to use that calendar to make sure that you haven't worked yourself into a mistake. Check your calendar. Commitments are sacred. Rule 25. No one can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. There are no instances in music, especially playing an instrument, where someone can do it for you. You're going to have to figure out how to make it work, how to do it yourself. Sometimes that means just making sure that you're putting forth the proper effort to get whatever technique down. Sometimes that means you're going to have to put in the effort to practice something, to learn something, to expand your skills, so on and so forth. Sometimes it means that you're going to have to take charge of a situation. Sometimes it means you're going to have to assume responsibility because no one else is going to do it. No one can do it for you. You have to do it yourself.
Rule 26. Check your feet. It's amazing to me just how much improvement a musician can show based entirely on having a good solid foundation. Starts with your feet, whether you're sitting or standing. Check your feet. Stand square on the ground, stand up tall, sit up tall, have good posture, make sure your breathing apparatus, your arms, your legs, everything is set up for success, and you'll be amazed at how well you can do.
Rule 27. Quiet transitions. Do you have any idea how much time gets wasted in a rehearsal when the first thing that happens is everybody needs to talk? Everybody needs to play their instrument. Everybody needs to make noise. The faster we move, the more we can get done. And the quieter everyone is, the easier it is to move fast, so we can make those transitions quickly. In a rehearsal, your job is to be ready for whatever's next, not to have a conversation and be social. Save the social time for before or after rehearsal. But during rehearsal, quiet transitions, so we can move faster. Rule 28. Gum is not an option. I cannot begin to tell you how much I hate chewing gum, both as a personal preference and as a music teacher. I can't stand the way it looks, it sounds, it tastes, it feels, so on and so forth. You're chewing something that you're not going to eat, but it can give you a lot of sugar. That's a problem. As a music teacher, gum gets into stuff. Gum gets on stuff. Gum gets in the way. It stops you from breathing properly, and it makes me worry that I'm going to have to be concerned about a student choking because they have gum in their mouth and they take a deep, full breath in, and it causes a problem. I'd prefer to avoid that entirely. So Rule 28, gum is not an option. Rule 29, Mr. Earley wins. This is the rule that kids love to complain about and challenge the most, but they don't understand. It doesn't matter if they challenge it, because I win. Rule 30. Just because you can, doesn't mean you should. I do feel like there's an oboe joke or maybe a viola joke in there somewhere, but this is a guideline that I think applies to life and applies to musicians in a specific way. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it. Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. Sometimes knowing that something is a possibility, but one that should remain unexplored, is the right choice of action. So as you are pondering what you do as you go through life, as you go through music, as you go through rehearsal, Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Rule 31. We make music, not noise. I can't stand to hear people talk about, oh, what kind of noise does that instrument make? Well, it doesn't make a noise, it makes a sound. And when you learn enough about that sound, it becomes music. We make music, not noise. Noise is chaotic. Noise is without direction or purpose. It is sound left unchecked. Musicians are in the business of making music, and music is the organization of sound and silence. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant. But we make music, not noise. Rule 32. Sit like a musician. I get really tired of seeing kids struggle because they're sitting folded in half. You're not a pretzel. You're playing an instrument. You're singing. You need to be sitting accordingly. Sit so that your breathing apparatus can function properly. Sit so that you can play with all of your focus on the sound coming out and not having to worry about holding yourself up. Sit like a musician.
Rule 33. Never leave your instrument unprotected. I can't tell you the number of times I've watched a kid drop an instrument because they just weren't paying attention as they moved around, whether that means propping it up on their chair, handing it off to somebody and not looking to see if anybody actually was holding it, even banging their cases around. Cases are not meant to protect against heavy impact. Like, they're meant to keep things organized and protect from scratches. You have to make sure your instrument is protected. Put it in a case if you're going to be out of the room for a while. Don't leave it standing up on a chair. I have a particular way I always put my trombone down on the floor if I don't have a stand available. Please, please, for the love of everything band related, never leave your instrument unprotected. After much anticipation, Rule 34. Use your brain. Figure it out. I know everyone was expecting this to be the actual Rule 34. More on that later. It's not that. Use your brain, figure it out ties it a lot into Rule 25. No one can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And the thing that really drives that home for me as a teacher is I get really tired of students expecting me to do things for them, expecting me to give them answers, expecting for their peers to give them answers. I always tell students when they're on an assignment that I expect them to work individually that they have to use their own brain and not borrow their neighbor's, nor should they loan their brain to their neighbor so that everyone has the opportunity to use their brain and figure it out. We're going to have a follow-up to this Rule 34 at some point. Stay tuned. Rule 35. Bring it. One of the most frustrating things for me as a teacher is to watch students be unsuccessful due to a lack of effort. And a lot of times the lack of effort isn't lack of caring or lack of wanting to be successful so much as it's concern about what their peers might think, fear of making a mistake, that sort of thing. And I always tell students they are more likely to be successful if they just go ahead and give it their best effort and put it out there. And if they make a mistake, we can fix mistakes. A lack of effort is a lot more difficult to fix. So every time they do something, they need to bring it.
Oh, it's already been broughten.
Rule 36. Do it again. As one of my college professors loved to say, music education is repetition. Music education is repetition. Music education is repetition. We have to do things more than once, and what I always tell my students is you don't practice until you get it right. You practice until you can't get it wrong. And ingraining habits and building muscle memory, building facility and ease and flexibility, all that stuff takes time, and it's going to require repetition. So when you do it right, that's great. Do it again. Rule 37. Roll with it. 37A. Deal with it. As musicians, we constantly have to deal with situations that may not go according to plan. And the better you can deal with that as a musician, the more dependable you are, the more flexible you are, the better a musician you end up being. Both in terms of how you play, as well as professionally, how you are treated, how you treat others, how well respected you are as a musician. Sometimes that means you missed an important cue in the music. Sometimes it means you missed a repeat sign or a coda or something like that. Sometimes it means having to adapt to being late or early or not ideal situations as far as the performance venue. I had to play jammed under a staircase in the back of a dimly lit jazz club somewhere in the Netherlands in college. The better we can deal with it, the better we can roll with it, the better off we are. Rule 38. There's no such thing as bad weather, only inadequate clothing. Yes, I realize this sounds like it has nothing to do with music or teaching. However, the more adaptable and prepared you are, the better off you'll be. The irony is, it's currently raining outside right now, and I am a little bit wet from being outside in it. The weather isn't the problem. I failed to bring a jacket. Could be my fault, could be not a big deal, depends on how I deal with that and navigate moving forward. The important thing is, you keep moving forward and you make the best of what you have at hand. No such thing as bad weather, only inadequate clothing. Rule 39. All music begins and ends with silence.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I cannot tell you how distressing it is to me as an educator when an audience will not be quiet when it's time to start. My very first ever concert as a teacher, I had my third grade strings in front of me, a room full of about 250 parents, and not a single one of them apparently understood how to stop talking or get off their phone. The same is true with classrooms. The same is true of going to the movies. Any kind of experience where you're trying to appreciate the experience, appreciate the moment, should begin and end with silence. Let the music speak for itself. Don't speak over it. All music begins and ends with silence. Rule 40. If it hurts, you're doing it wrong. Now, if you're doing something and it's uncomfortable and awkward, there's probably a better way. Sometimes it means that you just need to get used to it and figure out, stretch this, place that, get used to, build calluses, so on and so forth. But most of the time, true pain is not a part of the experience, or at least it shouldn't be. And doing things, enforcing discomfort, trying to live up to no pain, no gain, can result in some pretty problematic long-term damage, especially with repetitive motions like playing a musical instrument. So if it hurts, you're probably doing it wrong. And if it's a little uncomfortable, a little awkward, there's probably a better way. Rule 41. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Music should be fun. Music is hard work. Music is difficult and frustrating and heartbreaking and stress-inducing and sometimes monumentally difficult to overcome. But that's some of what makes it all worth it. And as musicians, it would do us better long-term to enjoy the ride, difficulties and all, than to just be upset that things are hard. In music class, you should be having fun. You should be working hard, but you should have a good time doing it. Some of the most rewarding moments of my career, both as a student and as an educator, have been those breakthrough moments where you finally figure something out that's been a problem. And you have that aha moment, and it all makes it worthwhile because suddenly it's gone from difficult to fun. Rule 42. Sing it like you mean it. My band students sing constantly. My private lesson students sing constantly. Oh, Mr. Earley, I didn't sign up for choir. I don't want to be a singer. Doesn't matter. If you can sing it, you can play it. And if you can sing it well, you can play it well. And sometimes getting the physicality of the instrument out of the way can help you unlock musical potential that you weren't able to before because of the physical act of playing the instrument. When you sing something, though, you need to sing it like you're not scared. You need to sing it like you're not worried about who's listening. You need to sing through it and make it count. Now, if you're doing something that is an actual singing activity, all the more reason, sing it like you mean it. Sing it with enthusiasm. Have a great time with it. Make the most of the music that you can. Sing it like you mean it.
Rule 43. Mind your business. Now, One of the tricky things about this is I'm not saying mind your own business and spud out, any of that sort of stuff. Mind your business means make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, make sure you're ready to go, make sure you're ready to learn, make sure that you have done all the things that you need to do to be successful. If you can help someone, by all means, help someone, but don't make yourself get in their way and slow them down on their preparations, because you got to mind your business. Rule 44, thou shalt not noodle. I can't stand when I'm trying to give directions and I can hear the sound of people playing their instrument over my directions. How are you going to know what to do if you can't hear me? How are the people around you going to know what to do if they can't hear the instructions? Noodling is one of those things that drives me nuts, both as a teacher and as a musician who's been in rehearsal full of noodlers. If you're playing when you're not supposed to, stop it. Rule 44, thou shalt not noodle.
Rule 45, never give up, never surrender. If you've seen the movie Galaxy Quest, you've heard that line before.
No, never give up, never surrender.
Never give up, never surrender. And it is true in music just as much as it's true in space exploration. Don't give up when you're trying to get something done, no matter how frustrated you are, no matter how much it seems like you're never going to figure it out. The more you can stick with it, the sooner you'll reach your goals, the sooner you'll be able to accomplish what you set out to. So never give up, never surrender.
By Grabthar's hammer. What a savings.
Rule 46. Precision is more important than volume. I don't care how loud you can play. I do care how cleanly you can play. How well can you execute a technical passage? How smooth can you execute a lyrical passage? Volume's great, but most of the time raw volume is not what we're looking for. I mean, it has its moments, it has its uses, but I would rather a performance be clean and precise, and then we work on volume after that. Save the volume for the 50-yard line. Precision is far more important than volume. Rule 47. There's nothing stopping you except you stopping. You ever play through something and it feels like you can't get more than a few notes in without making a mistake? You ever notice that makes it that much harder to work on a full passage or a complete section of something? A lot of times we as musicians tend to hear the mistake, stop in our tracks, and go back and try and fix it. Sometimes the thing that you have to do is just keep going, make a mental note of the mistake, let the mistake go and run free and go home to its mom. It's gone forever. And that's okay. Fix it on the next time through. Don't always stop and go back. Don't always be afraid to start. There's nothing stopping you except you stopping. Rule 48. Don't be a shenanigator. Now, this one came partly because my school's mascot is the Gators, and partly because shenanigator is fun to say. It came out of a conversation with some students at lunchtime in the cafeteria. They were being silly, and I told them to cut out the shenanigans, and not to instigate things, and that eventually led to don't be a shenanigator. So it works on two levels. Don't instigate shenanigans. Our mascot's the Gator. It's almost like a really tiny, compact dad joke. Don't be a shenanigator. Rule 49. Don't get abducted by aliens. I would rather believe that my students have been abducted by aliens and somehow been taken over, rather than they act like they don't know how to do things in my classroom. I do my best to provide all of my students with the fundamental basic tools that they need to either do something successfully right away or work towards success over time. There's a process, there's steps to follow, there's things to try. Tools in your toolkit, if you will. If you act like you're helpless and don't know how to overcome it, especially when offered encouragement and motivation and reminders of those tools, I would rather believe you're abducted by aliens. So Rule 49. Don't get abducted by aliens. Rule 50. Improvement is never finished.
We as musicians strive for perfection that we will never be able to obtain. How close we get to that perfection is largely up to us. The opportunities that we take advantage of, the things that we try, the work that we put in. Don't become complacent because something's better than it was. Wait until it is truly what it should be or could be to step back and look at the big picture and then see what's next. Improvement is never finished.